Good morning to Ruth, and good morning. I have to look at these little names. And good morning to Marvin and Kelsey. We're all arriving.
And it's not morning for all of us.
Yes, that's right. And what time is it for you?
5:30. I'm near Vienna.
Near Vienna. It's so exciting. I think we'll start by just having everybody say their names and where they're from as a way of just hearing all of our voices. So hello. Marvin, you decided to stretch into philosophy, right?
I'm stretching, Lynn.
Yes.
I'm stretching.
Marvin is in our community empowerment group and just getting your footing in this strange focusing world. And then, stretching from focusing to community empowerment is one kind of stretch, and then stretching from focusing to philosophy is another kind of stretch.
Well, it all blends together, Lynn.
Well, Jean was always worried that we shouldn't blend everything together like in a blender. Everything has to retain its own distinctness and be one interaction with everything else. And so we always have to be balancing that distinctness and the individuality of one thing and how it's all one interaction. So I see everybody arriving, and I see Vivian. Hi, good morning. Is there anybody who would like to say hello to somebody that you don't know here that's on the screen?
I'd like to say hello to Vivian. It's in the middle of the night there, is it not?
Right, it's 12:30 now, and I don't know how long I can stay, but I'll try. Thank you.
I think that's amazing that you're willing to be here with us.
You're very brave, Vivian.
Yeah, I love Lynn's groups, no matter what it's about.
Vivian, where are you located?
I'm in Taiwan.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so it's on the other side of the earth.
I've been there many times.
Oh, really?
I'm actually teaching focusing courses for Taiwanese students.
Ah, great,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
How many others have been to China or Asia?
Don't say China if she's in Taiwan. It's a politically incorrect statement.
Well, that's why I tried to correct it.
Well, it's a bit sensitive, but I think it's okay. I work mostly for China, actually, although I'm personally in Taiwan now.
So hello to all the people just joining. And please feel free to say hello to anybody you want to, or everybody. And I see.
Hi, Rachel. Put a light on so we can see you.
There you go.
Winter sun.
I think that it's just about 11:30, right? Are we ready to start our new adventure? I wonder if we can start. Jeffrey, you called on people last time, and I wonder if you'd do that again and just say their first name, and then you'll say your name and where you are rather than, and if you're from a different place than where you are, you might want to say that, but just so that we hear all of our voices. And the reason that we want to start our new module that way is that this isn't just an academic class in the philosophy of the implicit. This philosophy isn't only an intellectual exercise. This philosophy is also an instance of itself. It's a way of being. So one of the most important things about, the most fundamental things about the philosophy of the implicit is that we are interaction. So we're many people, but we're one interaction. And so it's not just about you listening to me, but it's about all of our beings and all of our voices crossing with each other and what we're going to make in these 5 sessions. So it's very exciting to see the ingredients of this new interaction. So Jeffrey, if you'll just call on people in the order of your computer,
Sure.
We'll have all our voices.
Okay. And please correct me if I mispronounce your name.
Absolutely. Having your name the right way is very important.
Mona?
Perfect. Yes. So I'm Amona, and I'm currently in Germany. And I think that's it, right?
Amona.
Yes.
Beautiful name.
Ruth?
Yes, I'm Ruth, and I'm an Israeli, but I'm near Vienna, Austria.
Welcome, Ruth.
Sigil?
So yes, I'm Sigal. I have at least 2 problems today. First is my throat, and second is my Wi-Fi. So just to say it, yeah, both about my voice. And I'm from Israel, northern Israel.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kelly?
Welcome.
You're muted, Kelly.
There we go. There. I live in the greater Boston area. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, nice to see you, Lynn.
And Marvin?
I'm Marvin. I'm living in San Francisco. I'm a New Yorker.
Thank you.
Beth?
I am Beth. I live on the East Coast of the United States in Delaware.
Jose?
Hi, I'm Jose. I'm in Sydney, Australia.
Wow. What time is it there?
3:34 a.m.
Wow.
Oh my God. Wow. You may get the prize for the most inconvenient time. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you.
Gray?
Hi, I'm Gray. I'm born and bred Manhattanite.
Vivian?
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm in Taiwan now.
Mm-hmm.
And Maureen?
Hi, I'm Maureen, Boston, Massachusetts, here now and here my whole life. Good to be here.
Welcome.
Rachel?
Rachel, I'm in England, and I'm appreciating being awake and
Kind of hard to hear your audio, but welcome.
Rachel, I think you might have to log out and log back in. It's a Mickey Mouse voice that you're having distorted. logging out usually helps.
Jonathan.
Wait, I'm Jonathan, and I am in the Eastern United States.
Randy.
I'm Randy, and I'm in Fairfield, California.
Rachel.
I'm Rachel. I'm in East Hampton.
Jim.
I'm Jim, and I'm in Lower Manhattan.
Julie. Hi, Julie. You're muted. Julie, you're muted.
Yep, I'm Julie. I'm currently in New Hampshire from the Boston area and grew up in Nebraska.
Great.
Dorothy.
I'm Dorothy, and I live in Forest Hills outside of New York City. And I was raised somewhat near there.
Natty.
Hi, I'm Nati. I'm in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and delighted to see some familiar faces here that I haven't seen for a long time. Hi, Jeffrey.
Noor. Oh, can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Noor, and I am currently living in the UK, London.
Hi, Noor.
Hi, Jem.
Liz.
Lovely to see you.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm in Manhattan, New York City.
And Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I'm in Queens, New York. And Dorothy, I'm your neighbor, also from Forest Hills.
Oh, wow.
Rudy.
Hi, I'm Ruti Chavatzelet, and I am in New York.
And Bahar. Did I get that right?
Hi. Yeah, that's right. My name is Bahar, and I'm in Toronto, in Canada.
Hi, Bahar.
Hi.
Arlene.
Hi, I'm Arlene Khan. I'm in, where am I? Princeton area, New Jersey, and I'm really happy to be here.
Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy, and I'm living in New York, New York, and I'm also very happy to be here.
Good.
And Rachel, we'll see if we can hear from you a little more clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Oh dear, no.
It's we see.
Uh-oh.
Oh, well. Welcome anyways.
Yes, welcome.
Olivia.
Rachel's in another group and with me this morning, and she was coming across so clearly in that group.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia. Good to be here. Right now I'm in Connecticut. I'm Jonathan's wife, so we're in different rooms, but in the same household.
And I'm Jeffrey from Vashon Island near Seattle, Washington.
Wow. Wow, we're a big world here, right? Did we have everybody? I think so. So I'm Lynn Preston, and I'm here in Soho, New York, and it feels like a continuation and something very new to be with you this morning. Why don't those of you who were in the module 1 raise your hands so we can all know, who to rely on if the newcomers get lost. Just contact one of these people and they'll give you all the answers. And let's just have the new people the people who are here for the first time. Let's have you raise your hand so we can give you a particularly warm welcome. I think it's about half and half, would you say? I think. So the people who are coming in new, you may have some catching up to do, but we're hoping to approach the same, somewhat the same material from a more clinical direction. So I think you'll be able to catch up with us. But I would like this class to be very much of a conversation between us all, among us all. And at the same time, there's a lot that I want to say to you, and ways of framing ideas. So we want both of those sides. And we want this to be somewhat of a review from a different direction of what we did in Module 1, some of the same materials and some new ones, but carrying it further. So we're going to start with the question, what is philosophy and why philosophy, that we started with in the first module, but maybe we'll answer it a little bit differently this time. Because, I noticed that in teaching things related to focusing, I have done it for many, many years, and it's always new every single time, because it isn't just a set thing. It's a process of opening up. So what comes to me now about philosophy and why philosophy is that having an understanding not only of a way of thinking, but what that way of thinking is made of, the kind of thinking that it is, and the very special kind of thinking that Genlin gives us in what he calls a new kind of concept. And it's not that he's the only one that uses this kind of concept, a process kind of concept, rather than a thing kind of concept. But he is presenting us with a unique way of using this kind of concept. And to be grounded as a focuser, as a clinician, as a helper, as a therapist. By the way, what do you like to call yourselves? How many of you think of yourselves as a clinician? Raise your hands.
What's the choices?
What's that?
What's the choices?
I'll give you the choice. Well, no, we're making the choices ourselves, clinician. Sometimes I call us therapists. Raise your hand if you identify with that. Sometimes I call us helpers. Raise your hand if you identify with that. Practitioners, raise your hand if you identify with it. There's something wrong with all of these words. And some people will say, oh, I don't like the word clinician, or I don't like the word helper. I mean, I'm not a helper. I'm in a carrying forward relationship. And I'm making a point of that because it's really to the essence of what we're doing here, that all of the words, as Jean would say, all of the words in the dictionary are insufficient. They're pointing at something that's so much bigger than those words say. And sometimes you need a whole string of words that you put together. But when I'm writing notes or writing something, then I have to choose. But is there another word that you would identify with that would be different than helper, clinician, therapist?
I call myself mostly a psychologist.
A psychologist.
Very involved in status. And I feel that I worked very hard to get a doctorate. So I don't want to just be part of the massive pool of therapists.
I like that.
No, that's horrible, but I'm just being honest.
Oh, we'll add psychologists to the list. Anybody else? Do you have another way you like to be, to think of yourself?
Teacher.
Teacher.
Yeah.
Any others?
I like accompanying, but I don't know how to say it in English. Like in
An
other languages.
An accompanier. Yes, an accompanier.
Accompanier, yes.
Good.
I'm a counselor, so sometimes
Counselor.
I'm
Oh,
called
yes.
a counselor.
Yes, yes, yes. Shall we use for today, for us, what would we like to be?
Well, sometimes I call myself a facilitator.
Facilitator.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we use Marvin's term facilitator for today? Okay. So now what was I saying about us? That we facilitators can benefit greatly from studying not only the theory of focusing oriented therapy, but also the philosophy that is the large container for it. And when we know something about what our thinking is made out of, how it works, you know, what Jean says, philosophy is about the about. How to see how we're thinking, not only what we're thinking. It gives us a kind of groundedness and a kind of freedom to be spontaneous, to be in touch with the moment and in touch with the interaction, because we feel like it's not just flying by the seat of my pants, you know, when I'm. Do we have that phrase in, how would you say that in other languages, flying by the seat of your pants? Do you have that metaphor in Israel? I'm just thinking that's such a particular metaphor.
What does it point toward?
It points toward that it's an old metaphor, I think, flying without any motor, without any wings, but you're doing it just by the seat of your, just by holding on to your pants is what I what I see. And we're
without plan,
without
safety net, no safety net.
A safety
yes,
net. Yeah.
Without any mechanisms to keep you in the air. And spontaneity is so important when you're a facilitator, and spontaneity that's grounded in the knowing that that you have wings, you have mechanisms, you have a knowing that even though you don't know right then where you're going, you have a sense of the territory that you're flying in. You have a sense of the broad strokes of direction. And studying the philosophy of the implicit gives us that confidence. And it also enlivens us. It's like philosophy, and especially this philosophy of the implicit, is such a large way of thinking. It frees us from some of the ways that we can get stuck. I've been particularly interested in teaching Jean's philosophy for facilitators. I think particularly now, because I'm very concerned with communal issues, political, social issues, and I see how conversation gets so completely bogged down and stuck in ways that philosophical inquiry can unleash us from, unhook us from. And so that's a particular interest of mine, that philosophical way of looking at things can set us free. So I want to start with the distinctions between philosophy, theory, and practice. And I want to say that one of the things about the philosophy of the implicit and focusing-oriented therapy is that it's the interaction of the three levels, the philosophical, the theoretical, and the practice level, that enlivens us. When you have theory that's just theory, and you don't have a sense of the philosophy, and you don't have a sense of the actual practice, it's very dead. And if you just have the practice also, and you don't have the theoretical underpinnings, and you don't have the philosophical umbrella, it can be mechanistic. And so we need not only to understand all three, but to see how they are all interconnected, to feel those connections. So this journey that we're taking isn't just an intellectual journey, but a journey that we want to enliven our thinking, feeling, being, doing all together. And so we have that as an intention for ourselves. So I'm going to make this distinction between these three realms, knowing that there aren't sharp delineations, but philosophy is a very particular inquiry, and it's about the about, Jean says, which doesn't really mean anything to me at first until I get into it more. Philosophy isn't about the ideas so much as how we get those ideas, what those ideas are made of. So I think of it as a path of thinking, and the starting point in that path that Jean uses is the starting point of implicit experience. Like, what is that? What is our experiencing? And philosophy asks the question, what do we mean by that? What is that? How do we know that? It's concerned with the kinds of concepts that we use. You know, in science, we're using what Jean called unit model concepts of breaking everything down and then putting them together in different ways. And that goes a long way in many ways, but it doesn't reach to many dimensions of experience. And Genlin's kind of concept that he's using is starting the journey from the foundation of process, of interaction, of movement, of the experience of those things. So we could think of theory, that's the next level, as the about. Theory, well, let me back up a minute. Philosophy, I wrote down actually and sent to you some questions that each of them asks. So philosophy asks the question, how do I think about this? What kinds of concepts do I use? And theory, that's about something, asks more the questions of who are we as people? What's wrong here? What's needed? What is my role? What's my job? So that's about people. And the realm of practice or method or technique or skills ask the question, you know, how do I do this? And many beginning therapists in my groups through the years have said, well, that's all well and good, but what do I say to my client when they walk in the door? You know, what do I do? And the whole realm of skills and techniques and practices answers that question. So we can start either with theory and then see the philosophical implications and the practice implications, or we can start from practice, or we can start from philosophy. And in this seminar, we're starting with philosophy, but in this module, we're going to go further into the theoretical and practice implications of those philosophical concepts. I gave you Jean's 3 points to look over. Some of you have looked at that and read that last time, and there's so much in it, you could read it many times. And I just want to note that this is a video about theory. Jean was one of the very few where he was talking theory. He's not talking philosophy here. And I gave you the 5 talking points that Jean, I think I have to say, from my point of view, somewhat naively thought he could give this to focusers and people could actually speak to their colleagues from these 5 talking points. Could you do that? Raise your hand if you could. Jean was banking that you could read these, and then maybe you could have a philosophical discussion with your colleagues, but I think it will take us a lot more than that. But I love that he did that he wrote us 5 points that he's writing for facilitators and focusing people and saying, well, you can use these 5 points to help your colleagues understand where you're coming from in focusing oriented therapy. And so that's new to everybody in this class. But we're going to emphasize the foundational concept of interaction first and show how this concept has the levels of philosophy, theory, and practice. But before we go there, that's our next thing. I just want to hear from you, especially from the ones who were here in Module 1, just a sentence. Don't give us too much because we have such a shortage of time here. And I want to give you something experiential also. And I'm hoping to be able to do that by 12:30. So what did you find helpful about talking about philosophy or thinking philosophy? Or not? Or left you puzzled? Just anybody, a sentence about what philosophy does or studying it does, what it did to read these.
I have something I could say.
We have two people, good. So we had Jeffrey and
Gray.
Gray, okay.
Go ahead, Gray.
And you go first and then Jeffrey second.
Sure. Listening to Donata Schuller explain the philosophy, but also embody it, gave me a direct experience of interconnectedness.
Yes, a direct experience of interconnectedness. And I love the way you say she embodies it. She certainly does. And what we could say about our seminar here is that we want to embody the philosophy, all of us, and to study embodied thinking. Jeffrey, what were you going to say?
I'm having new experiences and more hopeful of being able to talk about philosophy with students in ways that doesn't make it sound so otherly.
I love that. Yes. We don't want it to sound so otherly. We want to bring this sort of rarefied language that philosophy is. We want to bring it down into our bodies and into our daily moment by moment experiences with our clients. Anybody else?
I wasn't in the first group, but can I say something anyway?
Sure, you can.
The more that I study Jean, the more it seems difficult for me to separate out these three things, these three realms. They seem just hooked into each other or spill over into each other in a way that is brings it to life for me. I'm not really sure I know any, if I can study it with just one or two at this point.
Good. So when you're studying practice or you're studying theory, the philosophy is all in there. And when you're talking philosophy, the theory and the practice is right in it. Yes.
Can I be understood? I'd love to come back. Yay.
Please.
I was reading the 5 philosophical talking points. I wasn't here for the other one. And by the end, I love how maybe this is what the last person saying. He's sort of describing what he's doing. He's pointing at something that I haven't been able to say, but also the sadness that this can't be communicated. I'm like, oh, no wonder my childhood was so hard. I wanted to talk in this way. And no one could, and no one knew it was missing. So it's like, oh, I'm very happy to be able to speak in this group and that we can talk about this. It's practical and it gives us a whole new universe. Anyway.
That's wonderful, Rachel. Yes. We can think about the challenge of saying the unsayable, and whatever is real and deep and in our bodies is unsayable. But words can be put together in certain ways with images, and we are the language, Jean says in that philosophical 5 points, right? We are this languaging being. That's our nature. And so the unsayable becomes sayable as we are able to make the language point where we want it to point. And that's so exciting. It's so exciting philosophically to be able to say the unsayable, because we see how language works and we can use it. It's so exciting theoretically that we can talk about all of these aspects of being human and find ways of language, all different kinds of ways of languaging it that gives us direction, and the actual immediate experience of what we're up against. This is a Jean phrase, what we're up against. Jonathan and I were talking about the nature of trauma before, the trauma that maybe everyone in some way experiences, that basic, when that unsayable that we're up against becomes sayable and shareable, that's what's healing. That's actually what Jean would say, it carries it forward, the saying. And so a lot of what we're about here is finding how we can say the unsayable on all these different levels. Okay, I'm going to go on. We'll have more chance for you to talk in just a bit. I just want to give an example of how this concept of interaction first works on these three levels. On the level of philosophy, when we talk about interaction first, what we're talking about is starting this path of thinking starting not with things, but starting with processes, starting with interaction. That's the fundamental unit of being somehow. And I shouldn't say unit, because Jean talks about the unit model as the things, right? But starting with the interaction that makes the things, that contains the things, that encompasses the things. And that's quite, I was going to say, quite a trick, quite an expansion to begin to think, starting with thinking about, thinking with, thinking through interaction rather than things. And then I just want to say, for those of you who then begin to feel like, well, when you thingify, reify something, you're doing something bad. No, we all do that. That's what we do. We make everything into a something. And in focusing, we make a something, right? We make it into a thing. But then we open up that thing and let it go, let it be bigger. So maybe even saying trauma is thingifying. You're saying it's this is my trauma, right? And it's making it concrete. But that can be helpful. Oh, it's trauma, and that brings something in the body when we say that. But then to say, well, what do I mean by that? What is that? What does that word mean to me? What kind of concept is the concept of trauma? That's where the philosophical thinking brings this broader notion of how it's made. Another analogy would be that theory is the map making. You know, we all by our nature are making maps of life, of the world, of human nature. And I've met many focusing oriented therapists that say that they practice without theory. They don't like theory. And I always have these arguments where I'm sure if we really looked at the argument, we'd be saying the same thing. But from my point of view, maybe you'll tell me from the colleague's point of view. From my point of view, we can't practice without theory. We are all theoreticians just by our nature. We're always making maps and going from maps in our minds. What kind of journey is this that therapy is? What do human beings need? Those kinds of questions. What do I do? What is my role? Those are questions that always come. But philosophy is looking at the kind of map that we're using. Are we using those? In my iPad, I can change the map from, a street map to a topographical map to a world map, and then that place will look very different to the map of the street to the inside of the apartment. So philosophy asks what kind of map you're using, and can you use more than one map, or can you be informed by knowing the kind of map that you're using and knowing that it isn't the only one. So interaction first on the philosophical level is also what Rachel was pointing at. No, it was Gray, about Donato teaching us about how the body and the environment are one system. The body, as we breathe in, the air becomes part of our body, and then we breathe out, and then the air is different, and everything is an interaction. And in that little video, you might have been struck by Jean saying, look at my eyes. These are an interaction. Look, my pores are sweating out and taking in my breath. He was showing us all the parts of his body that is an interaction, and that something so charming and delightful about bringing it into this very immediate realm of how we are interaction. So on the philosophical understanding of interaction first, notice the difference between saying, I am having an interaction, or I am in an interaction, than saying, I am interaction. Just notice that difference in your body. I am interaction. Our being is made of interaction. One of my very favorite people, one of my favorite teachers, died this week, Thich Nhat Hanh. How many of you are familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh? From
he died?
Many of you are. He died, yes.
And he was,
yes.
He was 90, I think, or 90.
Yes, yes. And I think you can find a lot about the ceremonies of his death on YouTube. I was very moved by him and by his life, and now really remembering him as he's passed on.
Wow.
I was always struck by his term, interbeing. Are you familiar with that? Let's just see how the terms themselves, a term is a kind of scaffold of something, how it resonates. So if I say interbeing and I take that in, Thich Nhat Hanh would point to the paper and say, this isn't a thing. This is being with the tree and with the people that cut down the tree, and with, he would go on and on about all that's in the paper, that the paper is an interbeing. Let's see what that does, that term. And now take in the term interaction, that we are interaction. We don't have time for a thorough discussion of this at all, but I'd love a couple of comments about what the term interbeing does, and if it's different than what the term interaction does in you. Remember, terms are what they do. It's not like you have a right term or a wrong term. A term is something that points at something. It's what it does. Is it a good pointer? And terms always point to something a little different.
I feel
Anybody
that
else?
both of those terms take me away from immediate experience. I don't resonate with them at all. Even just took me away. It doesn't feel like it has to do with anything that I actually experience. It's just kind of removed and theoretical
So those terms don't point. You may need to find a term that would point to the experience of not only being a skin envelope with a you in it, but the more of that you are more than that self. And maybe we can give you that as a focusing prompt, and you could think about what term, how you would say that to yourself. That I'm not.
I had a funny thought. I had a funny thought, which was that Kurt Vonnegut would probably have been able to make up some terms that would work better than this and like he always had these funny words that were almost like focusing. I can't think of any right now, but the funny terms for, that thing when you feel this way, or that thing when you meet somebody else from Indiana and you don't really care that they're from Indiana.
Yes.
He always had those kinds of very, they were completely opposite from any kind of philosophical.
Well, since we are interaction, in quotes, you and Kurt Vonnegut are crossing, and you're going to have an inner Kurt Vonnegut. I always think about my clients in terms of my inner so-and-so and my inner so-and-so, how that person is living in me. So you can embody him and let us know next time, what he gives us as a better term. I think that Gene himself would also say interaction sounds like two things that are doing something with each other. This and this are interacting. And Gene didn't want to communicate that at all. There aren't two separate things that are doing something to each other. There is this process of this process of we're going to have to find our own way without an right? Of penetrating being, of
would you say that the two that the interaction creates a field that's one thing?
Yes, but Gene is starting with the field. That Gene says there are many people, but there's one interaction, and the people are derived from the interaction. I mean, even biologically, of course, there's a sexual interaction, and there's a baby that's born of it, and that happens to be two people, but that that the broader, larger is making the whole systems within systems. We could call upon maybe the metaphors from dynamic systems theory about systems within systems within systems that are all co-creating the universe on many, many different levels.
Then a question. Why didn't Genlin just call it communication? Because when we use interaction, it keeps us separate. There's a separateness that exists. Also interbeing. So I'm wondering about that.
I think we could use communication if we think about the universe as a communication. I mean, we're not just talking about humans, right? We're talking about everything. If we thought about, that's an interesting point. If we thought about everything is made of communication. Hydrogen and oxygen are communicating. Everything is a communication. We'll try that on with ourselves, you know, and we'll come back to that at a different time. But you are thinking philosophically with me now, right? Thinking about what the words do and what kinds of words we're using and what we want the words to do. We're not just accepting the words as this means this. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want. So we're doing it together.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So interaction first as a philosophical term is a kind of foundation of how we think. And I'm going to give you a little experiential exercise for that. Theoretically, interaction first. How does it answer the questions that we posed, that theory asks of what's wrong when somebody comes to you for help, and what's needed, and what's my role? What would be, how would interaction first answer the question, what's wrong for people when things go wrong?
There's some kind of stuck interaction or repeating interaction.
Right. That's something, Jean would say, something that was implied by our being, like being valued, or, I mean, if I go on, it will be too narrow, that didn't happen. And that something got stuck there because the interaction that our being called for didn't occur. You know, so if my plant is wilted and turns yellow, I know that there was water, and an interactive process with water that wasn't that my busy schedule, I forgot to water the plant, you know, and then it will call out for water. So something didn't occur, or something got stuck there.
I have a thought that there are three kinds of stuckness. That is, the person shows up and that person is stuck. Then our interaction is stuck at points, and I could be stuck as well as the facilitator. So we have the interaction of three stucknesses.
And there's, right, that's right. So the interaction with the client with herself may be stuck, and we have a lot of emphasis in that in focusing. What is the interaction of the self with the self? How can we make room for things, welcome things? What is the relationship between the implicit and the explicit, between the one in there and the one speaking, or the interaction between the therapist and the client, or the interaction of the therapist with themselves. And these are all together. It's never just one. They're all interwoven, these kinds of stucknesses. And so if we can ask what is needed, and because we're short on time, what was Gene's pithy way of saying what's needed in that video? He said, you know, my main job as a therapist is what? Does anybody remember that line? I quote it all the time.
Is it just to keep the person in the chair? I
Well,
think that's towards the end.
The person's stuck there. I think
I mean, there could be a lot of answers, but there's a particular way he said it that I don't want there to be a right or wrong answer, but I wanted this particular one. So anybody remember his exact words?
Is it to be the interaction that's needed or something?
Yes, that's
Yes.
right. That our main job is to be the interaction that will, what he says is will make it better, but I don't like the make it better part, but that will carry something forward. It's our being that is needed, you know, so that's a very profound thing. And many of us have to take that in over and over and over again, that our main job is to be the interaction that's needed. That's our role. So we'll go into this much, much further. On the practice level of method, there's so many tools and skills to learn about how we can be the interaction that will make something better, and kind of principles about it.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question, Lynn?
Sure, go ahead, Robin.
I'm on. Well, I loved what you sent this morning, and I have interaction between me and the client, put nothing between, but be the maximum contact and the minimum intrusion.
Right, that's right, right.
That was a wow.
Yeah, well, when we when we look at what's, how we do this, Gene is giving us some practice principles that we can keep in mind. And these are all implied in the concept of interaction first, to have maximum, I always love that too, to maximum contact and minimum intrusion, that you want to find that experience of connectedness, that we are always completely all embedded in each other and connected. We are this one thing, but we don't feel connected, and we have to feel the right kind of connection that that enables us to not feel crowded, but not left alone. And that's one of the main skills, right, of being a focusing oriented therapist. There were some other things that I gave you as little examples there, right? In that I didn't need you to really review this before our class, but I'm so glad that you did, Robin, that you got that in time.
I have one more thing that I just, if I can read a sentence, because this spoke to me. Gene says to the client, let's be interested in you, so that we can have some joy in finding how interesting and surprising and intricate and complicated and unexpected and unpredictable this reality is once, and then it says it opens up. And that struck me because it starts with, let's be interested in you, and then the you goes to an it.
Mm-hmm, right. Jean loves to use it because it doesn't mean anything in a way. You know, let's be interested in you. What the it is, this, whatever needs to be attended to that the person can sense in their bodies. And maybe they're not going to sense it the way that focusers like to sense things in a visceral way, but the atmosphere of it, the mood of it can be sensed. And that will open up. Whatever it is that needs attention will open up. So I'll give you a little example just to play with. It's very scanty. Years ago, a client came to me sent by his wife, and he said that his problem was that he was a boring person. And I said, wow, you're a boring person. And spontaneously, without thinking of it, I said, that's so interesting. I never met anybody that introduced themselves as a boring person before. How did that come about? And I said almost to myself in this moment, I guess nobody was ever really interested in you. And the guy was really taken aback. And he said, well, of course nobody was interested in me. What was there to be interested in? My mother was blah, 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 my father, you know. And he went on to tell me about how he experienced himself as not worthy or important enough to warrant anybody being interested in him. So how does that tiny little example tell us something about the principle of interaction first? How was I in that moment embodying it? How was I calling upon it?
Well, I think it has something to do with welcoming, even though that word is.
Mm-hmm.
You were being the interaction he needed, which is someone to be interested in him, to help him realize he is interesting. The interaction itself creates moment.
Yes. Another one of those principles that we have is that it's not what we're saying, but it's the doing in the saying. And I just love that principle. You know, Jean says it isn't the content of the person or the content of the conversation, but it's about the quality, the way, the texture of the interaction. So very spontaneously, and when philosophy and theory is part of you, it's not that you're necessarily thinking of it, it just becomes part of you. So very spontaneously, you know, I'm thinking, what kind of interaction would be this feeling of being a boring person? And my curiosity came from the feeling of genuine interest, and also somehow knowing that is what we needed, what the interaction needed. We need interest here. And that could be easy to have, since it came so naturally.
Can I share something here, Lynn?
Sure, please.
Like when I worked with some people, or I myself am working with someone, like someone has said to me, it's like there's like a something here, and like, oh, can you welcome that? But that's distinct from them welcoming it in me by being the interaction that fulfills that, implying that's there. In a way, by them telling me to welcome it, it's almost not welcoming how I'm not welcoming it. So it's
Yes.
like a super smooth move that you.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think sometimes we get into saying, "Can you welcome that?" rather than being the interaction, which is welcoming it. Because when we welcome it, the other person is going to, in some way, welcome it or not welcome it. But then there's a discussion about welcoming it because we are the one interaction. You know, so if I had said, that's a good point, Jonathan. If I had said, can you be friendly to that feeling of being a boring person? It would have done a whole different thing, right? Mm-hmm. The guy would have said to himself, I'm too boring to know what it means to be friendly to something, right? Or I don't know. But the natural thing is to bring into the interaction what's missing.
And you stimulated his own interest in himself just by being interested in
yes.
having had a person present themselves that way before.
Right, right. We can't really be interested in ourselves without somebody being interested in us. We can't find ourselves without someone finding us. We can't know
I was very struck by the way that Jean, in the video that you referenced, he says we, you know, he uses the term we.
Yes.
He says, I don't want to leave the client alone there. Mm-hmm. So you know, there's a sensitivity to what the client, how the client is impacted by what the interaction is, and leaving the client alone, especially in, you know, something traumatic or any time practically, is not the interaction that's going to heal, you know, and pointing to, or, you know, if you ask a client, I think sometimes they feel alone, you know, well, what is that? Can you go there? Or what, you know? So I like the way he said, well, we'll do this, you know, we'll be with that small child. We'll, you know, I hadn't heard it said that quite that way. And I was moved, and I felt that was very helpful. Yeah. Because it is the interaction. We're together, you know.
Exactly.
Alone. Yeah. And that's healing.
For bringing that in, bringing that up. That's a moment that's one of these moments that can become sort of part of our being as facilitators. That a moment where Jean says, we, and she says, boy, it's almost like she comes out of her traumatized state to be interested. Oh, that's a new one for me, she says. Mm-hmm. And then it's so amazing how Jean and the client, it's almost like they're doing thinking at the edge together. And they say, well, it's not the kind of we that where you are, there's something I have to pay attention to you, but it's the kind of we where I forget, she has a special term, and I love that the client makes their own terms, a we that is just there but not too there or something. We'll have to see together exactly what she says. I also noticed in that video that there's a point where Jean keeps saying to her, welcome your tears, you know, see if you can let them through. And the client finally says, you know, you're distracting me by telling me I'm fine with my crying, you know, and it's so interesting that when he's directing her to do something, that falls flat. But when he said, we don't know, there's a whole other thing. And so there's this idea in there in terms of the practice of interaction first, of making we statements and I statements as well as you statements. Not only can you be friendly to this, but we don't know this, or can we take a breath here, or I'm really, what I said to that client, I'm really interested in your being a boring person. You're designating yourself as a boring person. And those I statements and we statements make a big difference in terms of the whole feeling space that we're in together.
Lynn, may I say something?
Sure.
This really raises such an interesting question. I think, like, what is what is the kind of we that's needed? What is the particular kind of we that a client needs or a friend needs, and how? And the idea that it's quite different because of
Absolutely.
how I think in the material you sent, like how we're each such an intricate, different, there's only one of us in all the universe. And so the kind of we that maybe my mom liked or I like, that I want to impose, or I think that's how you love. You smash up right into the other person. My ex-husband used to say, you're stealing my breath, which was very cute. Then we got divorced. He was very cute. What is the right we, and who feels, you know, obliterated or something by
yes, exactly.
Look what I did for you. Look what I got for you. Oh, what?
Right.
You feel helpless or not?
And yes, Rachel, absolutely. And Gene says, you know, in that video, when he says, you know, we are interaction, and he says, but there are millions of kinds of interaction, right? And they're changing every minute. So we know that the territory is this interaction, but then there's so much we need to know about sensing into the kind of interaction that's needed, and sensing what my interest has been is not only finding the felt sense of our own inner one and our felt sense of the other, but the felt sense of the us that can be the felt sense of the group, the felt sense of the community. And a felt sense is the way in which our bodies are in interaction with everything. So our bodies can sense so much about the world, about the other, about everything. And it's actually in our bodies, this sense. But I think this is a moment to give you a little experience of this. And this is very, very, very minimized because of our eternal problem of time. But let's just stretch for a minute so we can get ready to have an experience. We're having an experience, but get ready to have a focusing experience together. You know, if you need to run and get a drink or something like that, or get up and, you know, move a tiny bit just to change or to change our position a little so we can recenter in our bodies. Take some breaths. Yeah. Here we are, right? Here we are. Exploring interaction first on all these levels. Let's settle into our bodies as we're at the edge of our thinking together here. And I'd like to invite you to think about a difficult interaction. For this, you might not want to use the most difficult interaction in your life, but a difficult interaction. And it could be with a client or another a family member, friend, or with yourself. You know, because interaction is not only with others, but we are a particular kind of interactive process with ourselves in many, many ways. Just let your mind very gently and easily go there. Not get into it, fully into it, but just touch on it. Like, oh, I know there's that thing there, that difficult interaction. Maybe find a name for it. And then if you have a paper or phone or something, just jot down the name of this interaction that you're focusing on. And then just write a few words about what's hard about it for you. Just whatever comes. Don't belabor it. Don't make it professional. Don't just whatever. What's wrong there? Just anything that comes to you about what's wrong. Why do I have trouble with this person in this way? Or why did I have trouble in that conversation? Just the way you would tell it to a friend. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for that. You might want to even circle words that stick out for you in that. What's wrong? Tell me when you're ready, because that might take a little time. And you're not going to be able to do the whole thing now, but you can save it for your focusing partnership. You have enough of it there to work with? Just raise your hand if you do. Good. Most Most people do. Dorothy needs another minute. I know that feeling, Dorothy, and I know I'm rushing you. Now what I want you to do is go back inside, and we're going to look at this from a different perspective. Most likely when you said what's wrong, you thought, you might have, maybe some of you didn't, what was wrong with the other person? They're doing this, they can't focus, they do this, they do that. I feel this, I don't like this part of me. And now I want you to back up a little bit and see the interaction. What is the nature of this interaction? So it's not what's wrong with the other person or what's wrong with me, and everybody, including us facilitator therapists, are always thinking, well, what am I doing wrong as a therapist, or what is the client not doing, or what's wrong with this client? But to look then instead about what is the nature of the interaction, and see if you could have an image of it, of what it looks like, or a metaphor. Or a felt sense phrase that would say what this music is like that you're both dancing to. What is the pattern of the dance? This takes a real focusing, doesn't it? Where we have to get a felt sense of the interaction itself. That's a big thing I'm asking you to do. Like you have to study for years and years and years to do that. I'm asking you to just do it. And focusing can help us to take a step in that direction. Some ways that we might talk about an interaction would be, like it's a pursuer distancer interaction, or it's a help, what is it? A help rejecting complainer and an urgent helper interaction, or it's a one-upsmanship interaction, but something that includes you. Both of you are in this. And find a name, as I said, or an image, and write that down.
What are we writing down?
The name or the image, the metaphor for the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So first you wrote down what's wrong here. Now you're looking at the nature of the interaction, the dance, and a word or image that says that, what it feels like. For both of you, this includes the other and you, but from your perspective, of course. And when you're ready, just raise your hand. I can see, several of you took a big leap there and got that. And if it doesn't come to you right away, it's okay. You can go back to this. But now I want to ask you, what was the difference between focusing on what's wrong and focusing on the interaction? And there would be a further step, which we don't really have time for now, which would be what's needed in this interaction. What might be an element? Just jot down that question and go back to it later. What might be needed in this interaction to make it better, as Jean says, to carry it forward? What might be implied? I'm missing something that's implied in this stuck interaction. Okay, would anybody share what that was like? Yeah.
This is Beth. This was very rich for me. I have a new client whose way of thinking I don't share, and I find it difficult to relate to her belief systems. And so I pictured us in a dance where she wants to dance close and I don't want to dance at all. And so there's distance, there's no touching. And what came to me was I need to embrace her. And that felt perfect.
Wow. Uh-huh. It needs to be the kind of dance where you're holding each other like a wall. Yeah. Thank you, Beth. Anybody else? This is this little snippet is part of a larger process that I use in supervision sometimes, supervision groups. Of the larger process would be to write it, what's wrong from your perspective, what you imagine the other person would say is wrong, and then the interaction, and then what's needed. And that usually takes much more time. Anybody else?
Well, I'll share something if nobody else wants to. This relates to me. And it's a particular problem I have with another person who has a lecturing style. That is, they come across to me, and I don't know whether it's because of their origin or their culture or their education.
Right now, we're just interested in, that is what came to you. They have a lecturing style.
It makes me feel like a child.
It makes you feel like a child, yes. Now, Marvin, I want that second part, the contrast of, if you look at the interaction of the lecturer and the child, is there an image for that kind of as a particular shape of an interaction, and could have a name? What would you call that?
Conflict.
Well, conflict could be lots of things, but it's a very particular kind of conflict. I have an image of it. I don't know if you do. I have an image of the lecturer and the child. I wonder if we could just call it the interaction of the lecturer and the child. Would that say it? Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah. And just look at them, this couple, the lecturer and the child. And in my mind, there's like almost a little drawing of it. And see what it's like to look at the interaction itself. Well, that's a very interesting interaction. It would be wonderful if we put in the chat the different kinds of images or names for interactions. If you could put, Marvin, in the chat, the lecturer and the child, the other image that Beth had is of the waltzer, the one who wants to dance close, and the one that's sitting out the dance or something. That interaction. But if you found a name or an image for your interaction, put it in the chat. But let's also share verbally. We don't want to do it all in the chat. I just want that to be there too.
I put in the chat painful for both.
Yes, and that's a description, but I want a word that says that particular kind of interaction, because there's many interactions that are painful for both, but this is a very particular one, very particular kind of dance. But you should say to me, Lynn, that says it to me, right?
Well, we're not dancing. We're not dancing. We're doing our own dances.
Right, that's right. Anybody else?
Yes, can I share?
Yes, please.
What came to me was something as simple as what was wrong in that interaction was that I was just not there for that interaction. I was probably, and the other person wasn't either. Probably I was there interacting with some part of myself, but not there with the other person. All the time, the word that came to me was this phrase that you mentioned from Tina Tan, the interbeing and the beingness that is required to be that interaction. So it's not possible to be that interaction if you're not there for that.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So
and the image that came to me was the two people, me and the other person, facing the other way, not facing each other, but facing opposite ways.
That's very interesting.
Go ahead, Arlene.
That's right. Okay, I just have an interaction with a client where I called it hit and run. He makes appointments and then he doesn't show up. And then he'll get back to me and make another appointment. And I'm feeling like there's this pursuer distance, and what further came to me is more a kind of echo, a narcissus kind of situation. And I think what's needed is for me to let go in some inviting, kind way where I'm interested in you, and when you're ready, you can
Right.
But it was hard to come to that, so I appreciate the exercise.
Yeah. Once you get the image,
I circled the words. It was the lack of connection, disappointment, being a pursuer, being directive. I was too directive. I maybe had the expectations. I think we became this pursuer distancer.
Pursuer distancer, yes. And I loved your title of hit and run.
Right.
He's hitting and running, but then that leaves you out.
Right.
But there's hit and run.
He would have a felt sense, I think, of my expectation.
And then you are right. You are
seeing him sort of like echo in the forest, you know.
Right.
Narcissus is coming.
Right. And you are pursuing is part of it. Yes. I was noticing when I was in that attunement, and I was giving you examples of kinds of stuck interactions, and I said the help rejecting complainer is a a term, right, for a kind of stuck interaction, but it leaves out the other person. So there's the help rejecting complainer needs the one who needs to give help.
Right.
I didn't want to say the compulsive helper because that sounds derogatory, but the one that wants to is the eager helper and the help. There's always the dynamic of the two-wayness of it that we're getting at, which is really not just two ways, but many, many ways. But for this exercise, we're talking about the two ways. Anybody else?
I have one.
Jeffrey was gonna go.
Someone left a voicemail requesting therapy, and my practice is full, and so I was, my thing was, I really don't like saying no or disappointing people who ask for help. And then the phrase that kind of grasped the interaction was a reaching out, because I called the person back and they said, "Oh, we've met before. I know you. I'll wait. I really want to work with you." And it kind of shifted the whole thing for me when I heard that.
And so what was what would be the image of that kind of interaction?
Well, literally a reaching out.
Yes.
And
yes.
And that something in me could feel that way, as opposed to, oh, here's someone I have to say no to.
So you were reaching out as well. In the first feeling, it's the other reaching out for you, and you have to say no. And
like it's too much.
Right. There's the reaching out and the too much. That's the right, the dynamic. And then the dynamic shifted to the reaching out and what were you?
Kind of a reaching back, or a feeling, a meeting.
A meeting. Yeah, wonderful. Yes. And we could almost see that as an image, right? The reaching out and and then the reaching out and the meeting. Reminds me of that famous on the ceiling, the God reaching, and
oh yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Notice if something comes in you that says, oh, I want to share this, but I better not because whatever. See if you can go to that edge. Because if you go to the edge of sharing when you're a little shy or something, it changes the whole group, right? All of us have then permission to go to our edge, say things that we're not sure of.
I had something of an interaction where also with the dance, where someone is like, I'll meet you on the dance floor, or go, I'll be there in a little bit. And then I'm standing on the dance floor and they're not there in any particular amount of time or ever. And that experience of like unprotectedness and publicly being like very anxious and waiting and being exposed, and how do you keep your composure, and but the waiting and then what comes of like the grasping of where are they, or anger, or so something about that being like asked to dance or something, or I'll meet you there, and then the not coming and having to manage that space of the other not being there.
Yeah, yeah. And I would invite you, Rachel, to go from there and do that next step of seeing in the image where the other is, the dynamic between you. So you're standing on the dance floor, angry and humiliated and grasping and waiting, and see if you could put in the image what the other, how the two are fitting together. The pattern of the asking and disappearing and the waiting and grasping, that these are fitting together. It's sort of like what we're doing in this exercise is seeing if we can broaden our perspective from the perspective of the other or the perspective of ourselves, either one, to the interaction that includes both. And of course, as we go on, it includes much more than both those individuals. It includes their culture, where they are, the time. It includes, in COVID, it's going to be different than, before COVID, or, one country might be different than another, but it's not just those two, but to broaden our perspective to encompass the larger of the interaction itself.
Can I just say it? The sense
Sure. Go ahead.
The sense is that the other is like at the dessert table at the wedding, and is like getting the chocolate fondue, and talking to someone else, and is entirely like forgotten. So it's not even like there's an intensity of a
right.
us. It's that there's an us that I think is happening, and they are absent. They
right.
Just
right.
did a drive-by
right.
and on their way to
right.
eat
right.
sugar.
Right. So it's the interaction of the casual invitation that isn't fully, the casual invitation and the urgent reply or something, something that would grasp the sense of the both and how they are in relation to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we are going to need to stop here, and let's just have a couple of closing comments. Maybe a breath. And what we do in our community empowerment as a closing is we have people just say a word that's there for them, that would be their sort of what they're left with. Can we do that? Just call out a word.
I could start. I'm here with itching questions.
Reaching question.
No? Itching? How you say itching? Huh? When something is itching?
Itching. Oh, itching questions. Oh, good. Write them to us. We have, I should have said all of this, but we have a place. Jim says we're just, I forget what he said. We were landing on somebody else's blog, but I think of us as having a place on this blog, on the focusing oriented relational community empowerment website. And I sent you that information, but there's a philosophy page, and put your questions or comments on that page so that we can continue our dialogue after today, because 2 weeks is a long time to even keep these thoughts and feelings in our awareness. Anybody else? Just a word.
A little deeper clarity.
Deeper clarity.
Growing.
Growing.
Inclusive.
Inclusive.
I have a phrase.
Good.
Interaction means broader, and it means we can do things in the interaction or doing.
I love it. Interaction means broader, and we can do things in the interaction. There's action in the interaction. Yes.
A deeper sense of the meaning of the concept interaction, which came from when someone challenged the word.
Yes.
Welcoming.
Right.
Broadening the idea.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to have the interaction.
Right.
Learning to see the wallpaper.
Seeing the wallpaper, right. We have time for one more.
Our main job is to interbe.
Interbe, yes. Yes. Well, I will see you next time, and thank you all very much